The next phase, which will, the next meeting, which is I think June 22nd, which is the next open house, will be to present some ideas, preliminary concepts. And as Ned pointed out, these ideas aren't going to simply be just a pretty picture. It's also going to include these issues of financial sustainability, metrics of operational consideration, specific land use recommendations based upon what we've heard, what we're seeing, and all these trends we're talking about. And pros and cons of these various options will also be discussed because, again, there are going to be some ideas that have very good outcomes potentially, but there may be some consequences to that. And it's important that we present those pros and cons with this process so that the membership can see those things and determine ultimately what's in their benefit. We're really going to spend a lot of time at the next open house talking about some of these ideas and actually helping to get membership feedback on them, see what really is resonating and what really makes some sense. This step is obviously a big chunk of our work, and it will obviously will consider all the information we've got to date. The last next slide. The last part of our process here will be to actually create a refined plan that takes that information that we've gotten and puts it into a format that can communicate to the broader membership all of these ideas, is supported by these financial information, this market information, the analysis and operational information. And also, as Ned pointed out, discusses what phasing makes sense, because there's obviously a relationship between doing something and the time sequence it takes to get there. There are certain steps that may make some sense to do in the evolution of a particular issue. And we will work very hard to provide some recommendations for phasing that, as our recommendation, that the association can then use as part of its long-term strategic planning. And that's really what this all ends up resulting in ultimately, is in a master plan that is actually a strategic master plan, a master plan that's helping the association look beyond next year and the year after that, look way out in the future. And it will obviously include a lot of very specific things, but it also includes some objectives, we believe, that will help guide future decision making, so that I think ultimately one of the big things that will be in the final master plan will be that you can't ignore financial, you can't ignore market, you can't ignore operational considerations in whatever decision is made, because those things are always constants to the process and they need to be considered. And membership should be engaged in that process so that they can interact in a dialogue about, is this really that important to us, or do we want to? Is this worth spending the money on? And why is it worth spending the money on? It's worth spending the money on because it adds value to your lives, it adds value to your property, or whatever the case might be. And that's an important part of this master planning process. Next slide, please. But back to communication real quickly. We are trying a number of venues. I'm just going to go through these rather quickly because they're here as well. We are trying a number of venues to communicate with the membership. The first was the newsletter that came out. You already had that copy. The next one will go out in April. The purpose of the April newsletter will be to help summarize some of this inventory and analysis portion of our work.
And the survey.
And the results of the survey, right? The newsletter 3 will be distributed prior to our second open house in June, and that newsletter will contain some of the ideas, the preliminary concepts I was talking about, as a way to help get people interested before the open house actually happens.
And also for the third newsletter and also the second newsletter, we understand that some of the people that are here now won't be here in June, and some of the people that aren't here now will be here in June. So we're trying to make sure that everybody in the membership knows what's going on as it's going on. So the April newsletter will talk about the results of the survey and the results of our inventory, which we'll be presenting to the committee at the end of March, and then we'll send that out to you and it's like, okay, well, here's what we found out, and here's how we're proceeding. And then the third newsletter will actually summarize the concepts that we'll be talking about at the June open house, so that even if you're not here in June, you'll see those and you'll be able to react to those in some of the other methods of communication as we go forward.
And just so you know, this presentation, this information is all going to be posted on the internet. So anybody who's not here today will actually be able to download this video and all these boards, and actually be able to have some idea. The idea is we understand that there's a lot of seasonality to the membership here. People come up for the winter time, they come up in the summertime, and it's important to recognize that through this process. Next slide, please. The survey, I know probably a lot of you have seen it or have even responded to it. I know I've heard some comments from people that some of the questions were sort of hard to understand or didn't understand why this question was there, where did this list come from, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the questions came from, obviously, there's some key demographic questions we're trying to understand in terms of membership composition. They also think it's important to recognize that this is really the first time, in our understanding anyway, is the first time that the Strategic Planning Committee, through our work, has actually went out to the broadest membership possible. This survey went to everybody. And at this point, like I said, we have 350 or so respondents back. We're getting more every day. We've got a bunch on the web. So this is actually very encouraging that we're getting a lot of people responding and a lot of people adding comments. There's actually a lot of substantive comments that are being put into these surveys, all of which will filter into our process. So it's very important to recognize that. We will provide a summary of this in newsletter 2, as Claire pointed out. Email, as I mentioned earlier, there is a specific email address for this, qllamasterplanning@sdgroup.com. Again, it's a great venue if you have a specific issue, a specific concern. You can send it there. It comes to us. It gets put into our process, and those don't end up going into any specific report or anything like that. That's just really part of the process of gathering data. So we're not going to use that as a way of indicating one individual or not. That's really not the point of it. It's really meant to be a quick way of getting some response back from the membership. And it will be available throughout this process until we're complete. We are planning on and having some focus groups, and we are still working on the details of what the composition of the focus groups will be, but some of the preliminary ideas would be they would be comprised of some operational folks in terms of the facility side of the house, which I think is very important. There's also a bunch of groups that use different recreational activities, the mountain, ski hill, for example, the golf course, for example, tennis, all these various constituency groups. It's important to have focus groups include those members as well so we can understand the specific issues that a group might have. And how these typically work is they are done usually over the course of a day. They usually last about an hour. We try not to get it too long because it starts to get complicated. They're pretty small, so we usually like to do 5 to 8 people depending on the number of people we need to fit in. They're facilitated, and they're very conversational. They're very open, but there's going to be some key questions we'll ask every member to contribute to in the focus group. And the idea behind those focus groups is that we will actually present to them sometimes some ideas for preliminary concepts. What do you think of this approach to this issue? Or what do you think of this solution to this issue? And that's a great way of getting some feedback. And I think we'll have more information about the composition of the focus groups as we keep going on, as we get more and more information about the membership and understand the membership better. But this is a very important tool in our work to help us understand what is the depth of some of these issues, what are the really unique opportunities that might exist, what are some really good strategies for solving some problems that they have not gotten out to the public yet. So this is a great approach to that. Next slide. Open houses. As you are here today, you know about